This week's Torah portion, called Vayeshev, meaning "and he dwelt," is again, like the last Torah portion, about the animosity among brothers and the promise of restoration. This Torah portion begins with the story of Joseph. It includes the rising hatred that Joseph's brothers had for him, culminating in their selling him into slavery. In the middle of this account of Joseph's life, the Torah inserts an account of Joseph's brother Judah's life. Now, why are these stories intermixed? If Joseph is the favored son, why must he suffer the humiliation and exile perpetrated by his brothers? Why are these two brothers the central focus of this portion? And how do the lives of Joseph and Judah reveal God's plan for the ultimate reconciliation and redemption? I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is Words from Our Father. The Torah portion begins with Joseph bringing a bad report of his brothers' behavior to their father. Genesis 37, 1 and 2. Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now, what are we to make of Joseph's actions? Is he ratting out his brothers in a deliberate attempt to get them into trouble with their father? Was it some kind of sibling rivalry, like he did it, it wasn't my fault? Now, when we put Joseph's actions in context, however, it seems that his actions were justified and necessary. Jacob could not have been happy with his behavior of his eldest sons. Reuben's actions resulted in Jacob disregarding him as the future leader of the family and making him ineligible in Jacob's eyes as deserving the inheritance of the firstborn. Simeon and Levi, the second and third sons of Leah, had devised and brought about the slaughter of the entire town of Shechem behind Jacob's back. Now comes word that his sons by Bilhah and Zilpah have behaved no better than those of Leah's, and their behavior would reflect negatively on Jacob, just like Simeon, Levi, and Reuben's actions did. The actions of his older brothers place Joseph as the son who is favored to receive the right of the firstborn and the inheritor of God's promise to Abraham. He was the firstborn of his mother Rachel. Genesis 37, 3 and 4. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Verse 3 uses the name of Israel instead of Jacob. This switching back and forth of the names Jacob and Israel is interesting. It perhaps indicates that when the name Jacob is used, he is acting in accordance with the flesh, and when the name Israel appears, he is acting in accordance with the Spirit. This multicolored tunic that Joseph was given was the symbol of Jacob's choice of Joseph to receive the mantle of leadership of the family. Joseph's 10 older brothers hated him because of the choice of Joseph. Now, perhaps they hated him because the guilt of their own actions contrasted with Joseph's righteousness. Now, after this, Joseph received a dream from God, confirming his position as leader of the family. Genesis 37, 5 through 8. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream, which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dream and for his words. It seems obvious that the literal understanding of Joseph's dream is that he would rule over his brothers. But as we look at the context of the dream, we can see a deeper meaning. In the dream, it is the time of the harvest. Now, the time of the barley harvest is when the children of Israel were to observe the feast day. Look at Leviticus 23, 9 through 11, and verse 14. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring a sheaf of firstfruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord, to be accepted on your behalf. On the day after the Sabbath the priest shall wave it. You shall eat neither bread nor parched grain, nor fresh grain, until the same day that you have brought an offering to your God. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Now, just like the Feast of Firstfruits, Joseph's dream has an underlying theme of resurrection. This resurrection theme was recognized among the Jewish sages. First Fruits of Zion and Torah Club Volume 2, Shadows of the Messiah, quote the writings of Zerah Kodesh. This dream about Messiah, son of Joseph, alludes to the prophecy in Isaiah 52:2. Shake yourself from the dust, rise up. That is, he raised up and made to rule and lifted from the dust. And the words in Psalms 118:5. From my distress I call upon the Lord. The Lord answered me, alluding to them that will be saved from the distress of Messiah, son of Joseph, namely that he will not only be slain, but he will also live at the time of the redemption. And it will be said of them, Shake yourself from the dust, rise up. Now, in Joseph's second dream, not only do his brothers bow down before him, but also his father and mother. His mother, Rachel, had died 9 years earlier, giving birth to Benjamin, so this dream must pertain to some future event. Genesis 37, verse 9. Then he dreamed still another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bow down to me. When Joseph arrogantly related this second dream to his father and his brothers, they became quite jealous of him. Genesis 37, 10 through 11. He related it to his father and to his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Despite the jealousy and hatred directed against him, Joseph remained an obedient son. His obedience is demonstrated when Joseph's brothers were out with the flocks in Shechem. Israel asked Joseph to go check on his brothers and the flocks. Genesis 37, 13 through 14. And Israel said to Joseph, Are not your brothers feeding the flocks in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them. So he said to him, Here I am. Then he said to him, Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me. So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem. Joseph finally found his brothers in Dothan. When his brothers saw him approaching, they were overcome with their hatred and jealousy of him and plotted to kill him. They took Joseph captive, stripped him of his multicolored coat, which was representative of his authority over them, and threw Joseph into an empty pit. Genesis 37, 23 and 24. So it came to pass, when Joseph had come to his brothers, that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the tunic of many colors that was on him. Then they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. Wondering what to do next with Joseph when they sat down to eat, a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants happened to pass by. Now, rather than killing Joseph, they ended up selling Joseph to the merchants as a slave. Genesis 37, 25 through 27. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh. on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Now to cover their crime, they took Joseph's coat, dipped it in goat's blood, and presented it to Jacob, asking if he recognized it, hoping to deceive Jacob into thinking that Joseph was dead. Genesis 37, 31 through 33. So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped the tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "We have found this. Do you know whether it is your son's tunic or not?" And he recognized it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Without doubt, Joseph is torn to pieces." After Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers, the Torah portion deviates to the story of Judah. With the disgrace of Judah's older brothers, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, Judah, as the next son of Leah, is the one in direct line to receive the inheritance of the firstborn. Now, instead of inheritance going to Judah, Israel favored Joseph to receive this inheritance. Judah was the one who influenced his brothers into selling Joseph into slavery instead of killing him. Years later, it will be Judah who unknowingly confronts Joseph over the accusations of thievery against Benjamin. The account of Judah begins with his separation from his brothers. Genesis 38, verse 1. And it happened at that time, Judah went down from his brothers and turned into a certain Adullamite named Hira. Now the portion tells us that Judah went down from his brothers probably in response to the result of selling Joseph into slavery. Jacob's heartbreak over supposed death of Joseph will continue to haunt Judah. The division between the brothers is such that Judah virtually leaves the family. He enters a business arrangement with a merchant and marries his daughter. Judah's sons do not please God, and judgment falls on them. Genesis 38, 6 through 7. And Judah took a wife for his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. Judah then gave Tamar to his second son, Onan, to have sons for to carry on Er's name after his death. But Onan refused, and God killed him too. This left Judah only with his youngest son. Fearful that God would kill him too, Judah refused to give him to Tamar to have sons for Now it seemed that God was determined that Judah's firstborn son would not continue his line. In the culture of the day, Judah's actions would have shamed his daughter-in-law, Tamar. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She disguised herself as a temple prostitute and seduced Judah. Judah was not prepared to pay for the services of a prostitute, so he was forced to leave a pledge for payment with Tamar. Genesis 38, verse 18. Then he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" So she said, "Your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand." Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. In our society today, pledges such as these would be equivalent to giving her complete power of attorney over his affairs. The signet is the seal used as a signature. All official correspondence would be sealed with this signet. God says that his kings bear his signet ring. Look at Haggai 2, verse 23. In that day, says the Lord of hosts, I will take you, Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, says the Lord, and I will make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, says the Lord of hosts. The cord is the distinctive cord woven into the hem of the garment, identifying the wearer of the garment. The tzitzit that God commanded the children of Israel to wear contained a cord of blue. This cord of blue identifies the Israelites as belonging to God. And finally, the staff is a symbol of authority. The 12 leaders of the tribes of Israel each had a staff bearing their names. When they questioned God about his choice of Aaron as the family of the priesthood, each leader was instructed to present his staff before God, and God would indicate his choice of priesthood through the staffs. When Tamar became pregnant and she presented Judah's pledge back to him using the same Hebrew words that Judah used when presenting Joseph's bloody coat to Jacob, asking, "Please determine whose these are." Genesis 38:25 and 26. When she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Please determine whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff." So Judah acknowledged them and said, "She has been more righteous than I, because I did not give her to Shalal my son." And he never knew her again. Tamar bore Judah twin sons, named Perez and Zerah. At their birth, it seemed like Zerah would be born first, but God had other plans. Genesis 38:28 through 30. And so it was, when she was giving birth, that one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. And she said, "How did you break through? This breach be upon you." Therefore his name was called Perez. Afterward his brother came out, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Now it's physically impossible for a child once in the birth canal to retreat and have the other twin born first. But in the case of Tamar, God made it possible. Perez broke out of the womb first. With the birth of Perez, the line that would lead to King David begins. The genealogy of David is given at the end of the book of Ruth and begins with the birth of Perez. Ruth 4:18 through 22. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Amminadab. Amminadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. Joseph was the firstborn son of Rachel and was to receive the double portion inheritance. Judah, on the other hand, was the fourth son of Leah. But because of his three older brothers were disqualified, Judah was to receive the promise first given to Abraham. The blessing and the promise are split between Joseph and Judah. The descendants of Joseph and Judah are forever tied together by the blessing and the promise. When we look at the 10 spies Moses sent to look over the promised land, the two who gave the good report were Joshua, son of the tribe of Joseph's son Ephraim, and Caleb from the tribe of Judah. Now when they returned to the camp, they urged the children of Israel to receive the land, the promised inheritance. They were the only two men from their generation allowed to enter the promised land 40 years later. Now King Solomon, in his later years, went after other gods, forsaking the God of Israel. In answer, God split the kingdom into two, with 10 of the tribes given to Jeroboam from the tribe of Ephraim. Now at that time, God gave Jeroboam a promise similar to that of David. 1 Kings 11:37 through 38. "So I will take you, and you shall reign over all your heart desires, and you shall be king over Israel. Then it shall be, if you heed all that I command you, walk in my ways, and do what is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as my servant David did, then I will be with you and build for you an enduring house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to you." The split between the lines of Joseph and Judah continues to this day, yet there remains a promise of restoration and reconciliation between brothers. We saw reconciliation between the brothers in the last Torah portion with Jacob and Esau. But the relationship or restoration of the relationship between the descendants of Joseph and Judah remains in the future. The prophet Ezekiel prophesied about their ultimate restoration. Ezekiel 37, verse 19. "Say to them, Thus says the Lord God, Surely I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribe of Israel, his companions, and I will join them with it, with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they will be one in my hand. Joseph and Judah will receive the blessing and promise of the firstborn. Joseph, through his sons Ephraim and Manasseh, will again receive a double portion in the land. Judah received the promise of kingship through David, and a descendant of David will again reign from the rightful throne in Jerusalem. Through each line comes the promise of Messiah. Through Joseph, we see a picture of Messiah as the suffering servant who dies for his people. And through Judah, we see the son of David, the conquering king, who is victorious over the grave and comes to reign over his people. I'm Dan Cathcart for Moed Ministries International. Shalom and be blessed.